Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
In our last episode, we talked about photographic styles. And you know what? I've been playing around with them since then, and I've decided I'm not going to use them.
Ah, okay.
Because you have to use a really poor quality file format. And the photos, I'm sorry, photos are crap. These 2 megabyte photos in that HEIF format. By the way, I looked up, I sent you a message earlier. I asked ChatGPT how they pronounce it, and they said that it's pronounced HEF. I think that's with a hard F, not a soft F. And that HEIF, or HEIC is the container. So each HEIF is the file format, and HEIC is the container because it can hold more than just whatever. See, This is already starting to be too complicated, isn't it?
It is, especially just because the format is usually referred to as HEIF, and yet the files that you get are HEIC. And
right.
I don't know. I mean, is it too much to ask that the people who are developing these things consider how normal people will react to them? Because it's not like you're developing some like video codec. Like a video codec, the people who know how to do it, they know what it is, they know what's involved, bit rates, the whole bit. And that's a relatively small number of people. But everybody's taking photos. Everybody is saving photos, exporting photos. Why can't – I know this is just a pie-in-the-sky dream, but why can't they consider for a moment that, hey, regular people are going to want to know or want to refer to these things, and maybe we should make it, I don't know, human readable. And of course, no.
Well, to be fair, JPEG isn't really human readable. GIF isn't really human readable either. So it's just a tradition of computer stuff that they're not human readable. Now, Apple does try to make this simpler. If you go into settings camera, and we're going to spend the whole episode in the settings camera settings, and then you go into formats. At the top, you have 2 possibilities: high efficiency and most compatible. And then it explains below high efficiency is HEIF, HEVC, which is different than HEIC, and most compatible is JPEG H264. So HEVC is the video version, H264 is the video version of JPEG. So high efficiency, most compatible. What does that tell you? High efficiency, it doesn't mean that it's smaller. To me, it might mean it's faster, it's better, it has better colors. It doesn't suggest that it's smaller, which is really what it is. Most compatible, well, that's what I want. If I'm sending people photos, they have to be compatible so they can read them on Android. Because obviously this H whatever is an Apple format, right?
If I'm remembering correctly, Apple was involved in creating it. Like, it's an open standard. People can use it. Apple's the one who has jumped ahead.
I was being sarcastic.
Ah, you got me again.
It's just that's what all the Android and Windows people say when they meet a new format. Right? For years, people said that AAC was an Apple format. AAC is actually another name for MP4, which followed up after MP3. And I'd see all these people on the internet saying, oh, it's a proprietary format. It's locked down. Don't use it. And that's what made computer companies take longer to support AAC in a lot of applications. Now they all do.
Yeah.
But so your first choice here is high efficiency and most compatible. I'm going to choose most compatible because I don't trust HEIF, whatever it is. Because frankly, the photos I've taken with it look really ugly. Now, I don't know if I just haven't taken a lot of photos. Maybe it's low light. I took a photo of one of my cats the other day, and it was really bad. It was really patchy, spotty. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That does sound like a low light issue versus a file format issue. Because I've been using high efficiency as the default for a long time, just because I want to be able to use the thing that is the default, and you get more of a dynamic range with the HEIF, HEF, HEIC, HEIC, HOOK, HOC, WOC, CHOC, whatever. Like, there are advantages to it. I've not seen like a real obvious degradation between the two. And I think this is going to be a little bit of foreshadowing for the whole rest of this episode. I don't think most people are going to be able to tell. And we're running into that issue that we've been banging on for the last 3 episodes, because we're talking about the iPhone 16 and all of that, is that a lot of these options introduce complications that people don't really need to worry about. Like, you can worry about them, and there are advantages and there are disadvantages, but I don't know. There's a little part of me that wants to just say, look, if you're looking at all these acronyms and abbreviations and you're starting to get really weird or panicked about them, like, don't. Most everything here will give you a good image, and then there are different things you can explore. But
well, seeing most compatible makes me worry if I'm going to share photos with someone.
Yes, exactly. Terrible naming.
If I shoot a photo in HEIF and I send it to someone via email, does it come out as a JPEG? Does the Photos app convert it to JPEG?
I think it all depends.
It's like in our last episode when I talked about creating a flowchart for all these things. The entire Apple Photos experience is a hot mess.
Yeah.
They've gone from I'm taking a photo, it's a good photo, to I have 5,000 options with all the permutations now between the photographic styles that we talked about, the camera button and everything else. There's too many options. And so
exactly. No, that is exactly it right there. I was going to say, like, I have received HEIC files from people over text. If you drag an image out of Photos on the Mac and you drop it onto Messages, I think it will do a conversion to JPEG. Maybe not if you option drag. But see, again.
But see, that's another thing. If you export a photo from the Photos app on the Mac using the File Export menu, it gives you a different photo than if you drag it from the app. And that is just criminal.
Yeah. Because you don't know what you're going to get. And again, a lot of this is Apple being like, look. We are not going to burden you with this. Just trust us. Written in all caps, gold letters, whatever. Trust us that we're going to do something that is correct so that the other person can receive the image fine or whatever. And yet, I don't know, it assumes that you want just something that will work. Whereas sometimes I want to make sure that I am sending you a high resolution image to look at, or maybe I want to make sure that I'm sending you a RAW file so that you can play with. And I mean, off the top of my head, I do not know which is the magical combination to make that happen. And if things are getting resized, if you send something in email, oh God, like it could be resized.
If the last email you sent had resized it small, then the next one resizes it small.
Yeah.
It doesn't default to full size. Once it changes until you change it back.
Yeah.
God, why do we have to deal with this?
Why?
I want to go to the second thing in the formats menu. It says photo capture, photo mode, 24 megapixels or 12 megapixels. So this is the Fusion camera, which is basically, what's the word? Pixel glomming? When they put the pixels together?
Binding? No.
Something like that. So you have two options, 12 or 24 megapixels. Now the difference is size, and it's telling me, so I'm in most compatible JPEG, that a photo at 12 megapixels will approximately be 3 megabytes and a 24 megapixels approximately 4.8 megabytes.
Okay.
Wouldn't I want the better photo that's 24 megapixels all the time?
You would.
If there's only 2 megabyte difference?
Okay, yes, but this is more complicated. Because and it's pixel binning. That was the word, binning. BINNING.
Pixel binning.
However, that's not exactly what this is. So the 24 megapixel Fusion image is this computational photography thing, because your your Fusion camera, which is what they now call the 48 megapixel 1x camera. So that'll take
the main
camera. So that'll take a 48 megapixel image when you have it set in RAW or HEIF max. All right. Now, the pixel binning pixel binning is where it takes a set of 4 pixels and basically treats them as if it's 1 pixel.
So 48 divided by 4 comes to 12.
Comes to 12. So when you're shooting that, you're getting a 12 megapixel image. So it doesn't actually capture a 24 megapixel image. What it's doing is it's taking a 12 and it's also taking a 48 and it's also doing all of its multiple exposures for its computational processing and then putting those together to make a 24 megapixel image. So it's using the 48 as a reference to basically enlarge the 12 megapixel image. So you end up with a 24 megapixel image.
So does that mean the 24 megapixel image is lower quality than the 12 because it's enlarged from the 12?
No. Maybe technically, but so when you enlarge an image,
Pixel Peepers Anonymous.
Oh my God, yes. So when you upscale an image like this, then yes, you will get a degraded image unless you have some really good processing going on. I know. So okay, let's say you take a 12 megapixel image that you shot with your old Fuji camera and you wanted to make that a 24 megapixel. You'd have to run it through Lightroom or Photoshop or Topaz or whatever. And then that would upscale it and it would do some sharpening. And nowadays it can do a pretty good job of making that look good. But
especially with the AI tools in a lot of apps, they look
with the
really
AI
good.
tools in all the apps, exactly. But you're still basically faking it to make it larger, and sometimes it looks good, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the image, and it depends on how large you want to make it. So Apple's response to this is because they have all that AI computational technology built into the pipeline, is we're going to upscale it. But we also have this 48 megapixel reference image that we can combine that with to improve the detail and the quality of that upscaled 12 megapixel.
So a lot of apps are using something they call super resolution, which is what they're calling this sort of AI/machine learning thing.
Yeah.
Is that what Apple's actually doing now then to get from 12 to 24?
Yes, that's basically it. And actually, this isn't new with the 16. So Apple is calling, again, more confusion, more terminology. I believe it was the 14 Pro or the 15 Pro that introduced this 24 megapixel resolution. So that's been around for a couple of years. So this process has been around for a couple of years. In the 16 and the 16 Pro, they called the main camera the Fusion camera because it has better data processing capabilities. So it's better fusion. Yeah. Like it's like the hardware is faster and better. We talked in I think our first or second iPhone 16 episode about how this chip can move data more quickly, and so you have less of a shutter lag, and it can do more of this processing as it happens, over milliseconds. So it's always been Fusion. It's just this year they've decided to call it Fusion because it is more capable of doing more of those sort of fusion-y kind of things.
Fusion-y kind of things. That'll be a good title for the episode.
I know. I'm getting super technical right now. The fusion-y kind of doodads that happen inside the magic box that you carry.
Okay, let's move on. The next thing you get is a toggle, ProRAW and resolution control. If it's off, you don't have to worry because there's nothing to choose. But if it's on, then you choose Pro Default. 6 options: JPEG Max up to 48 megapixels, ProRAW 12 megapixels, ProRAW Max up to 48 megapixels, JPEG lossless, most compatible JPEG-XL lossless, JPEG-XL lossy, and it shows some of the size differences for the different formats at the bottom. What's really interesting is that these settings have a lot of explanations in them, whereas most settings really don't, and they have to explain because it doesn't really make any sense. So I'm pretty easy. I just put ProRAW Max because I know that I'm not worried about space on my phone, and I'd rather have the best quality to be able to edit.
Yes.
ProRAW format. So within ProRAW Max, I have three options: JPEG lossless, JPEG-XL lossless, and JPEG-XL lossy. So let's start by going at the top. JPEG Max up to 48, ProRAW 12 megapixels, and ProRAW Max up to 48 megapixels. I would make this simple by saying if you're not shooting a lot of photos and you have storage on your phone, do 48 megapixels, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that leaves us JPEG Max and ProRAW Max. What is this JPEG Max? Is this just the highest resolution JPEG that they offer?
Okay, well, first of all, we also have to mention that because you have chosen most compatible, that you're seeing the JPEG Max. So that's what you see. What I see is the HEIF Max up to 48 megapixels. And basically what this means is it is using the entire sensor, all of the pixels as a 48 megapixel, in either saving it as HEIF or JPEG. But basically, this is the way to use all those pixels, because by default, it wants to just be either that 12 or the 24. And they set that so that you can not use up all of your storage, but also some features are turned off when you're shooting at that resolution. I actually discovered this weekend. I was taking some pictures. We went to a pumpkin patch and taking some pictures of my family, and I noticed that it was not doing the automatic portrait mode. So one of the new things in the iPhone as of, I think, last year was if it detects a subject, it'll just generate that depth information even if you don't use it. And it wasn't doing that. And I realized it was because I had it set to the HEIF Max setting. And for whatever reason, maybe just because there's more pixels, more data to process, it's not doing that automatically. So I had to kick that down to the 24 megapixel. And here's the tip that I want everybody to know.
But hold on, there's no 24 megapixel option here. It's 48 or 12 in the Pro default.
Yes. So that is the Pro default. That doesn't mean that's what you're going to get every time.
Because if you're shooting with the ultra wide camera, you only get 24?
Well, if you're shooting I feel like I'm holding on against a gale force wind of technicalities. So if you are shooting with the ultra wide camera on the iPhone 16, which is 48 megapixels, that also applies here because that will be the up to, like
that's right. It says up to, right?
It says up to. So
like they say up to 5 times as fast, up to a full day's battery life.
Exactly.
Cheaters.
So here's the thing. When you are, and I'm looking right now to see if there's an additional setting for this, but when you are looking in your camera app, so you're framing a picture, what I see here, and again, I need to double check that I didn't turn this on, but at the top right corner, I see which format I'm shooting in. So it says RAW Max because I have mine set to RAW Max as the default, so the up to. However, it's got a line through it. So you can either have that turned on and specifically say, all right, I am definitely going to shoot RAW now, or I can tap it, turn it off, and then it will shoot in the regular for me, it would be in HEIF, and it would be at 24 megapixels with that main camera. And I'm not sure. I believe that the ultra wide camera, you either get 12 or 48. It's not doing the Fusion because it's not the quote
the Fusion which
camera.
is in the 1X camera. And with the 5X, you only get 12 no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So then we have ProRAW format, JPEG lossless, most compatible, JPEG-XL lossless, and JPEG-XL lossy. Now, I always thought that JPEG was compressed, but now there's JPEG lossless, which is new. So they're telling me that there's lossless and lossy, which is normal JPEG, but what's JPEG-XL? Where did that come from?
So actually, before I answer that, I want to answer my own question just a moment ago. Under Settings, Camera, Preserve Settings, there's a button that says ProRAW and Resolution Control. When you turn that on, that makes that little indicator appear at the top. So if you're looking at your phone right now and you're thinking that I've gone completely mad, you're probably not wrong. However, that's where this is. Also, I should point out that I'm not sure offhand, just because I don't have one here to test, is ProRAW still just a iPhone Pro feature? So if you have a 16 – I don't know.
I think the 16 and the 16 Pro do the same thing.
Okay. So because at one point they wouldn't even shoot in RAW, even though technically they were capable of it. And so I think Apple has brought that more in line. Okay, good. Again, if you're looking at your phone and you're thinking that we've gone crazy because you're not seeing these options, that could be part of it. And this is yet –
or we could be wrong.
We absolutely could be. No. We're podcasters.
No, but we both have the Pro phone, so we can't really see the non-Pro phone. So,
see that time I was being sarcastic.
Okay.
Because we're podcasters. We're never – yeah. Okay. So
what – JPEG-XL.
JPEG-XL. All right. I don't know enough about this as much as I think I should, but the general gist is Apple is again – well, actually it's not Apple. It's the whole industry being confusing. So JPEG-XL –
it's the Joint Photographic Experts Group.
The Joint Photographic Experts Group. And that makes you think, oh, I know what a JPEG is. A JPEG is an image that shoots at 8-bit and compresses things down to make a small file size, and it throws away data. Okay, so that's like a traditional old-fashioned JPEG that everything can read and everything can shoot in. That
invokes derision from real photographers.
That invokes derision for people like me who look at someone like you who's shooting with most compatible. But let's take that off the table.
No, I'm talking about people who always shoot in RAW. They think that JPEG is the devil's spawn.
Even more so. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what this is that so JPEG-XL is a RAW format. It's just like it's called JPEG because there are JPEG algorithms being used. And I believe it's also because it can save a JPEG image and use that as the preview. And then you also have the raw image. So ideally, I could send you a JPEG-XL RAW file. And if you did not have something that could read that natively, then you would still see it because it would read the JPEG portion of that.
Right. And that's something that's interesting to point out because whenever you shoot RAW on a real camera, the camera also embeds a JPEG in the RAW file, which you can use as a preview. It's a low resolution JPEG usually, but it's there for a preview in case you can't read the DNG or whatever RAW format file it is.
Yeah. That's also what you see on the back of your camera. So when you capture a RAW file
through your view and through your viewfinder.
Exactly. So like you need something to look at. So it makes this very small, low resolution version, not something you would want to actually use, which is why when you open a RAW file in Photomator or Lightroom or anything else, it creates its own preview based on the raw data, because the other one is just low resolution and you want to look at it at a higher resolution and edit that.
But that's also why when you open a photo in a photo editor, sometimes you see the preview and then it kind of snaps to the raw and you'll see a change in the image.
Yeah, because it's doing its own processing, which is most likely slightly different than what the camera did in the camera. So
okay, I want to quote from Wikipedia that says JPEG-XL is a royalty-free raster graphics file format that supports both lossy and lossless compression. It is designed to outperform existing raster formats and thus become their universal replacement. So this is a future-looking format. But later on the Wikipedia page, it says that Google's stance on JPEG-XL is ambiguous. And it has contributed to the format, but refrained from shipping an implementation of it in Chromium and Google Chrome. So while Apple's been doing this since last year, iOS 17, macOS Sonoma, etc., Google is very hesitant about this. The only way that a file format takes off is when everyone adopts it.
Yeah, this is the problem. And I mean, there have been numerous JPEG alternatives. I mean, I remember going to Macworld Expo and, which would be 20 years ago now, that And like having vendors there say, this is the future, this is what's going to replace JPEG, and it's, JPEG blah, blah, or whatever. And like they've never really caught on. If you go into Photoshop, you can save into all these formats, and it's crazy how many there are. It's never really caught on because everybody has to adopt it. So I think part of what's going on here is Apple has said this is the thing that's going to work the best because it also works as a container the way HEIF does, and that's really good because maybe it can just store all sorts of information. It doesn't have to be a flat file. And I think what Apple is doing is saying, look, we're going to put our weight behind this by making it an option in the phone and maybe make it the default in the phone, sort of like what they've done with HEC and HEF, HEIF and HEIF. But even that, you look at the market right now, and even though there are millions and millions and millions of iPhones that shoot in these formats already, it hasn't been universally picked up. And that's why you have to have a compatibility mode because not everybody has done it. I mean, I think when I was doing research for my Take Control of iPhone Photography book, if you want to be able to natively view HEIF files on Windows, you have to install like a separate thing. Like it's not built in at the system level. And I think it costs like 99 cents or something, but it's an extra step that you have to make Windows install in order just to view these files, which is also crazy.
Okay, so here's something I don't understand. Again, one on this screen, ProRAW Max up to 48 megapixels, and then it says the ProRAW format. And here I've chosen JPEG lossless most compatible. Does that mean that when I'm shooting in ProRAW Max, it's actually shooting in JPEG lossless? If I think back to our episode about ProRAW 2 years ago, where we realized it is not RAW and it's not entirely Pro, does that mean that it's not RAW and it's not entirely Pro? And that I should use halide if I want to shoot in DNG?
Well, okay, so all three of these RAW options will create a DNG file. So the JPEG-XL, JPEG, you're not going to have a file that says that's .JPEG-XL.
Right. So DNG is another type of container.
Yep. Yeah. So DNG is another type of container, and
this is confusing.
I've already forgotten your question.
Does that mean that my ProRAW Max up to 48 is a JPEG lossless file? So the ProRAW not being RAW is sort of RAW because it's lossless?
Well, if you have the JPEG lossless as your default, that's what we've been using for ProRAW since Apple ProRAW came. It was just never specified. Like that was just how it was encoded underneath. Okay. And so now you have the option to encode the images again under the hood in different ways. And so the advantages from what I understand with the JPEG-XL is you have some space saving options. So it's a more efficient codec. It's going to result in smaller RAW files, which is great if you're shooting a whole lot of RAW. That's good. And it'll do it in a way that gives you higher quality and gives you more dynamic range. So you're not stuck with 8-bit resolution, right? So
who wants 8-bit resolution?
No, who wants 8-bit resolution? Yeah.
That's so, old.
It's so old, and yet when you have maximum compatibility turned on, you're getting 8-bit JPEGs.
Unless I choose ProRAW.
Unless you choose ProRAW, yeah.
Boom. I got it right. Okay, quickly, this can't go on too long. We can quickly go to video capture. If you toggle on Apple ProRes, you get two options, HDR and log. If you know what log is, then you can shoot in log. Mm-hmm. If not, leave it at HDR.
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I have turned off HDR for video because HDR is the ultra bright, expanded dynamic range, and personally, I don't use it because I don't shoot enough video. And if you're going to be editing this footage, it's another step to deal with the HDR component of it. And so I think unless you really need to shoot in HDR, it's going to be displayed on a screen that can actually handle the HDR, then I don't know. It's more trouble than it seems to be worth. So I've just turned that off.
Hot mess.
Yes.
Hot
HDR.
Mess.
Hot dang riffin' mess.
This whole thing is a hot mess. This is ridiculous. Okay, boys and girls, go out and buy yourself a real camera, and you can choose between RAW and JPEG, and you take your RAW and you edit them. You do what you want. You don't have to worry about bits and interpolation and pixel binning and all that sort of stuff. But
for now, because part of what JPEG-XL wants to do is become a more universal standard, which with traditional cameras, I mean, there's nothing preventing a traditional camera manufacturer from shooting in JPEG-XL other than the fact that none of them will use any other RAW format except their own proprietary ones because they're all crazy. But one idea behind this also is that the JPEG-XL format would allow you to get a single file that could work the same as if you were shooting RAW plus JPEG. So right now, we shoot RAW plus JPEG, at least I do, so that I have both versions. I have the RAW and I have the JPEG that I can get. And so one of the promises, the future promises of JPEG-XL is that you get that same benefit in just one file, therefore less storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the camera manufacturers, I just can't see them doing that unless they have a come to photo Jesus moment and realize that they've been wrong all this time by having their own proprietary RAW formats. And
I think that should be illegal. It should be a monopolistic thing. I think the European Union should crack down on it. Now, I noticed that Leica just uses DNG. It's not proprietary, and you can edit it with anything. I think it's sinful that other camera manufacturers want to lock you into their platform.
Yeah.
I think another thing that's sinful is that when you buy a Fujifilm camera, they have this really neat feature that you can connect your computer to the camera and reprocess RAW files using the film simulations, but only with that camera. You can't upgrade to a new camera and do the same film simulation conversion because it depends on the specific processor that the RAW file was shot with. I think that should be illegal as well.
Yeah, yeah. Even more complication. And also, I mean, you will be able to find – even now you can find, I think, Sony cameras and Fuji cameras. If you wanted, you could choose HEIF as your default format. So like the option is there. The capability is there. I don't know if anybody actually does that. But – and then also like to bring this all around because – like our brains are already sort of starting to leak out of our ears just talking about this. So I appreciate you, dear listener, for sticking with us here. I also want to mention that you don't have to dig into all of this. You can get good photos using the defaults and then, like take baby steps into some of these settings if you feel it's necessary. One thing that we didn't talk about that I'm just going to touch briefly on is you have JPEG-XL lossless and JPEG-XL lossy. And that basically means the lossy will throw away some of the data. And from what I understand, it's very difficult to discern one from the other. So unless you are either working at a very high degree of production or you are a super pixel peeper, shooting just with the lossy versus the lossless is probably fine. And I guess we'll see as more people shoot it as this becomes more prevalent. But you're going to get a good shot. And if you want to avoid all this, you want to use something like halide, then you're going to get a good shot, and then you're going to get just the 12 megapixel basic RAW that the sensor captured that you can also work with.
Right. That's the other problem. The RAW you get from halide is only 12 megapixels, so you don't use all 48 megapixels of the camera. Well, you do, but it's reduced from 48 to 12.
Yeah. Apple doesn't let third-party developers access the full 48 megapixels. So for them, it's always pixel binned.
Okay. I think that's enough for this week because we've already gone well over our usual 30-minute limit. By the time you hear this episode, the newest operating systems will be out. So iOS, iPadOS 18.1, macOS 15.1, etc. And you will be able to experience the wonderful Apple Intelligence tools that Apple has been advertising now for months, and that you may have bought a new iPhone for and unwrapped your iPhone and didn't see anything about it. I'll tell you now, there's nothing to write home about. There are some interesting tools that work with words and text. And there is the photo replace thing. Maybe we should talk about that on our next episode. It's actually better than I expected when they first presented it. It works pretty well, similar to, what do they call it in Lightroom? The contextual replace, the generative fill.
Yeah, generative fill. Generative replace is the most recent name.
Okay.
And yeah, and actually also to mention that last week Adobe updated all of its tools. So if you use Lightroom, there's a whole brand new version of that. I should also point out that Apple Intelligence wrote this entire script, and we're not actually talking today. No. We're not quite there. There are other tools that can be like, well, never mind. I don't even want to get into those.
All right. Until next time, good luck updating all your devices.
Until next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to PhotoActive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discussed in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to PhotoActive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast.